Firewall fundamentals. Learning objective and key concepts. Learning objective. Describe the fundamental functions performed by firewalls, common firewall technologies, and the elements of firewall implementation and configuration. Key concepts. What a firewall is and how it works. Types of firewalls, individual, small office, home office, host software, commercial software, and hardware appliance. Next generation and virtual firewalls, types of filtering, and firewall selection. What is a firewall? A filtering device that enforces the network security policy, protects the network against external attacks, establishes control over network traffic, watches for traffic that fails to comply with the rules defined by the firewall administrator, prevents connections from unauthorized sources to protect network systems, services, and resources. A firewall analogy. A bouncer at a nightclub with a guest list with specific names or types of individuals allowed in or specifically prohibited from the club. The security policy defines the goals, objectives, and procedures of security. The firewall enforces the network security policy. Firewall filtering compares each packet received to a set of exception rules. If the packet matches an allow rule, the packet continues to its destination. If the packet matches a deny rule, the packet is dropped. Firewalls follow a philosophy or stance of security known as deny by default, allow by exception. The deny all rule is the final and absolute rule. Filtering rules are exceptions to the deny all rule. And there is an implicit deny rule at the end of each firewall. So if it doesn't match anything, the default action is to deny all. What is a firewall? It could be a gateway, a load balancer, checkpoint, screening router, transparent proxy, inline proxy, or segments. A basic multi-home firewall filtering and routing for two network segments. We see the internet on the left, the firewall is right there in the middle, and one interface protects the private LAN inside the network. The other interface protects the DMZ. What firewalls cannot do? Authenticate systems, act as a remote access server, view contents of encrypted traffic, act as a malicious code scanner, perform as an intrusion detection system, protect against insider attacks and social engineering, protect against threats for removable media, prevent physical attacks, protect against misconfigurations or other network equipment or poor security management. Now later we'll probably see here is next generation firewalls can act as a remote access server and view in contents of an encrypted traffic and can perform some low-level IDS. But just your basic layer 3, layer 4 firewall cannot do these things. In this example, we see a internet on our right. We have a border firewall next. And then we have routers and endpoints. And a border firewall cannot filter internal communications because it's not in line with the internal communications. It's only protecting from the internet. Why do we need a firewall? Computers and networks are frequently online all the time, connecting to the internet. Most of our businesses are connecting to the internet all the time. Most systems are detected, scanned, and probed within minutes of obtaining a public IP address. Malicious programs scan and attack automatically. Think of a firewall as a tool to prevent abuse or misuse of LAN resources. They guard against network segments inside your private network. Host firewalls protect a host and also protect a network from the host. An example of private network using firewalls to separate subnets securely. In this example, we have a distribution router in the center, and we have three different segments, and we have a firewall in front of each segment, and that's an example of how we can protect each subnet. And this could be a layer 2 or layer 3 firewall. In this example, because of the routing right there in the center, each interface would be a layer 3 interface to those firewalls, and then the interior would be our layer 2 interface to the switches. How firewalls work and what firewalls do. Firewalls implementations bump in the wire, that's a layer 2, a separate hardware firewall implementation. Bump in the stack, a firewall implemented via software. Bastion host firewall, or sacrificial host, stands guard along the path of a potential attack and takes the brunt of any attack. The firewall prevents malicious interactions to or from host software. Dead man switch. If the firewall fails or goes offline, so does the connection it was filtering. Here's an example of a bump in the wire implementation. We have the internet, a switch, a device outside of the network, the firewall, and then the inside server and switch. This is an example of a bump in the stack implementation. This is the most common way the firewalls are deployed as a bastion host firewall. Here's an example. We have the internet, we have the edge or border firewall protecting the inside of the network. Firewalls screen to filter traffic. They either deny by default or allow by exception. Traffic filtering based on information in packets or segment headers. Filter or block protocols or certain types of protocols. Differentiate between networks and subnets. Serve as a boundary between network areas and boundary devices. Act as a general filter for malicious activity or one-way sieve. Support inbound authorized connections with the LAN, such as virtual private network links for telecommuters. An example of port forwarding access across network address translation. In this example, we have the internet on the left, we have our firewall, our NAT firewall, we have a switch, and we have the server inside of the network. The firewall has a rule that says anything coming to 208.40.235.38 via port 8081 will get translated and to the address inside 192.168.5.74, and that is listing on port 80. Firewalls can provide port forwarding services, manage and control traffic, block or filter outbound traffic, filter based on content or encryption, perform basic proxy functions, and can perform address conservation through the use of an address conversion or translation system known as NAT, Network Address Translation, or PAT, Port Address Translation, and it also logs events. Types of firewalls. We have personal software firewalls, commercial software firewalls, personal hardware firewalls, and in our businesses we usually have commercial hardware firewalls like ASAs, Palo Altos, and such. Individual or small office, home office options protect against passive threats and active threats. Passive threats would be those that you must seek out to be harmed. Example, clicking a link downloads infected content. Technology that helps protect against these threats, pop-up blockers, cookie filters. Active threats would be those that take some type of initiatives that seek out a target to compromise. An example would be a hacker or a intruder or an automated worm. Or technology that helps protect against these threats can obtain reasonable security protection from simple and inexpensive firewall options. Some basic low-level things that we can do is, if you're using Firefox, you can look at the privacy section in the browser privacy and select strict, and it will block all trackers Firefox detects and may cause some sites to break. If it does, you can go in and add URLs or sites that you do trust, so it would not break those if it detects them as a problem. Other options could be a native firewall of the operating system, such as Windows Defender Firewall. In Linux, you have IP chains, IP tables, and such. Uh, you also have hosted by the internet service provider, connection devices, routers, or wireless access points. Some are basic filtering tools that block IP addresses and ports or protocols using a simple blacklist technique. Managing the firewall of an ISP connection device, meaning this is a managed device from the ISP. What you can do is try to use the IP address or the DNS name to log into the device. If it's prompting you for a username password, put the username password in. If ISP has locked that connection, call and ask for access. And if they're not willing to give it to you, consider replacing the device or switching ISPs. Also, it's a good idea to add your own firewall in between the ISP and your network. Converting your home router into a firewall. You want to log into to your home device through a web browser, and you want, if it's a Windows device, you try to figure out if it's a use ipconfig. On a Linux system, use ifconfig, and on a wireless system, iwconfig. If the device is a wireless router, change the SSID to the default setting. Limit the number of connections that can connect to this. Block unnecessary ports. And test the configuration by going to www.grc.com, which is a free Shields Up port scanning tool. Here's an example of an internal configuration screen on a ASUS wireless router. Shields Up port scan results confirming a well-configured set of home router firewall rules. Here we see the Shields Up web page. It's going to do a scan for universal plug and play, and it sees this is your IP address 45.19.50.87. It's going to probe the device. If it doesn't see anything, it's going to respond. Did not respond to any of our universal plug and play probes, which should be an expected result and means you are secure. In this chart, we're looking for some outbound ports to permit going out of our network to the internet. We'd want to open up port 25, which is SMTP, which is mail, and that's allowing outbound mail. Port 53, and that's DNS for for name resolution. Port 80 for HTTP. Port 110, which is POP or another email protocol. And then you have 443, which is HTTPS or SSL for secure internet. And then you want 465 and 995, which is SNMTP and POP, which some like Gmail and some other home ISPs free email accounts would want to use those. And then your DCOM ports, 1024 through 1035. Here's some ports that you might consider forwarding. Ports 20 and 21, which is FTP data and FTP file transfer protocol. That prevents external connections from downloading files if the business requires file transfers. For safer alternatives, you can use Secure SFTP port 22 or FTPS, which is 990. You have 23, which is Telnet. Telnet is clear and open protocol, so you kind of want to use that sparingly. Prevent external connections from insecurely logging into your internal systems. 53, DNS, prevent external entities from poisoning your DNS cache. And then 80, unless you are running a web server from behind your firewall, which is a bad idea. And then 81 and 82, often used as overflow for 80, not valid, no valid use, so just block those. Here's an additional ports you might want to consider. 137, 138, and 139 are considered net BIOS if you have a Windows system. Often exploited by malware, provides access to Windows system. 443, unless you're running a web server behind your firewall, which is a bad idea. 445, which is again another net BIOS for Windows 2000 or later devices, and 3074, which is TCP UDP for Xbox. Uses of host software firewalls. Host-based firewalls protect only the computer that it's on. Filter traffic by passing through the local system only. Can filter traffic or other systems such as Windows Internet connection sharing. Host-based or personal firewalls, not optimized for firewall filtering. Using Windows 10's host firewall is Windows Defender. It's sufficient for security for many situations. It's used in a variety of situations and configurations for home, small office, home office, and mobile. Includes configuration profiles, creates password-protected home groups or work groups to allow file and printer sharing between systems, granular control and configuration management interface, extensive logging. This is an example of a Windows Defender firewall with advanced security configuration. If you're using Linux as your operating system for desktop, laptop, or server, here are some options for Linux. Use of commercial software network firewalls. You install onto the hardware and provide network level security services. Some install on top of the existing operating systems, such as Windows. Others replace the operating system firewall, such as many of the which are Linux-based. Examples: Checkpoint, Cisco Systems Next Generation Firewall, Fortinet, which is FortiGate, and it's a VM, and Huawei and SonicWall. Uses of hardware and appliance firewalls. They are dedicated hardware devices specifically built and hardened to support firewall software. They do not require additional hardware or software for deployment. They need network connections and power connections. They have dedicated hardware resources not shared with other services and can protect a single system or an entire network. Next generation firewalls. They offer additional capabilities beyond traditional firewall functionality. May provide integrated IDS/IPS functionality. It's a third generation firewall technology. It's cost effective. You're offering multiple services in one box. Can be a single point of failure if the device fails, but you usually want to offer them in an HA capacity, meaning high availability, so you'd have them paired so that if one fails, the other one takes over. Complicated due to the various services they offer. They can be challenging, but they also are not that complicated. Deployment maintenance and log management are more complex. Yes, they are very verbose, and you would need dedicated log servers to capture all the logs. What are virtual firewalls? They're firewalls running between virtualized client and server operating systems. Virtualized software firewalls provide filtering services for standard physical networks, and the benefits are rapid deployment, quick prototyping, isolation, traffic management, quick recoveries, and testings. And where you'll find these virtual firewalls is like in the cloud through Azure, AWS, or it could be in a server farm. Dual-homed and triple-homed firewalls. Dual-homed firewall means you're protecting two interfaces. Triple-homed means you're protecting three interfaces. There are some other benefits of multiple interfaces with this type of firewalls. You're protecting segments, subnets, or networks connected to each firewall interface. They're electronically isolated from each other, and they prevent unfiltered traffic from leaping from one segment to another in an attempt to bypass the firewall filtering. And how we see that is through a traditional network segment. You have your exterior firewall that has connected. One interface is connected to the internet, one interface is connected to the DMZ, and one interface is connected to the inside. And they can't go between the different interfaces without rules. Ingress and egress filtering. Ingress and egress are common filtering practices to eliminate spoofing. They can also perform blacklist, whitelist filtering, protocol and port blocking, confirm authentication or authorization before communications continue. Egress filters spoofed source addresses that come from the opposite side of the firewall than where the address are assigned. filter spoofed addresses that are leaving the network. Here's some types of filtering. We can filter based on static packet filtering, stateful inspection and dynamic packet filtering, network address translation, application proxy, circuit proxy, and content filtering. Selecting the right firewall for your needs. You want to make sure that you address the security assurance, privilege control, authentication, audit capabilities, flexibility, the performance of the firewall, and the scalability. The difference between buying and building a firewall. If we buy a firewall off the shelf, it offers ease of setup, often works out of the box, needs only to be plugged in. Custom building can be less expensive and provides more desired features, but can require a lot of IT personnel effort. In summary, we've looked at what is a firewall, how it works, types of firewalls, individual, small office, home office, host-based, commercial, and hardware and appliance firewalls. We've explored a little bit about next generation and virtual firewalls and the types of filtering and then how to select a firewall.